buried Viking longship. Archaeologists used a high-resolution ground-penetrating georadar to find the nearly 66-foot longship buried less than 2 feet below the topsoil.
The most spectacular Viking burial ever found. You have to think about, how did the raids actually get organized? Who owned the ships? Who equipped the people on them?
Archaeologists in Denmark have uncovered a Viking mass grave, and the shock on site was immediate.
This is one of the things we really want to find out in this excavation. There has been a lot of preparations going on before putting the ship into the ground.
What should have been a routine dig exposed details that made the team stop and reassess everything in front of them.
The local farmer who owned the land, he wanted to open it to see if he can find something interesting. Best ship, the most horses, best furniture. Everything is the best, the most expensive, the finest.
Within minutes, it became clear that this was not a normal burial site, but something far more disturbing. The field that should not have held anything. The discovery began in a calm and very ordinary way. The land belonged to a farmer on the Danish coast who planned to extend his storage buildings. Danish law requires an archaeological survey before any ground is broken, so the local heritage office sent a small team to check the area. According to reports, the team included 2 Danish archaeologists and several trained volunteers who assisted with surface clearing. No one expected anything unusual. Most surveys in areas like this reveal only scattered pottery or the remains of old farm boundaries. The team began with basic inspection and then used ground-penetrating radar to complete a routine sweep. This technology is standard in Denmark and helps identify hidden features without disturbing the soil. The radar equipment was moved in straight lines along the field, and live readings fed into a portable monitor. At first, the shapes on the screen looked normal. Then one of the researchers noticed a sharp curve beneath the soil. The technicians expected a natural formation, so they widened the scan. The curve continued and soon connected to a second line. These curved lines were too clean to be natural. When they extended the scan across a wider section of the field, the image on the monitor shifted from scattered shapes to a single continuous outline. It was the full shape of a long structure, curved on both sides in a way that resembled the hull of a ship. It sat only a short distance beneath the topsoil, close enough that the archaeologists understood they were dealing with something unusual. The technicians stopped the scan and checked the equipment for faults. They repeated the sweep to rule out interference or technical error. The second scan produced the exact same result. A structure the size of a Viking longship was buried almost at the surface. Several members of the team reacted with disbelief because vessels of that scale are normally placed deep within protective burial mounds or located in areas already known for ceremonial activity. Finding such a large ship hidden near the surface of an active farm field made no sense according to the records they knew. As they continued reviewing the scans, they detected faint disturbance zones around the outline. These zones had inconsistent soil density, which suggested that the ground had been altered repeatedly over a long period. Some experts believed it was caused by old plowing. Others suspected earlier activity beneath the ship. The team decided to open a controlled excavation grid. They marked the perimeter, cleared the first layers of soil, and prepared for a full investigation. The mood shifted from routine work to cautious excitement as the longship outline sharpened with each layer removed. It became clear that the site was not a simple burial, but the gateway to something older and far more complicated. The ship that should not be there. As the excavation moved deeper, the first pieces of the buried longship began to emerge. The outline that had looked like a ghost on the radar now took physical form. The first thing they saw was the long base of the ship taking shape beneath the soil. It was darker than the surrounding soil and surprisingly clean. According to reports from the field team, several archaeologists paused when they recognized how intact it was. The wood itself had long decayed, but the imprint in the soil showed the full curve of the hull. It was the kind of preservation they usually associated with protected burial mounds, not with a ship resting so close to the surface. The shallow position became a central point of confusion. Traditional elite burials in Denmark are placed far deeper and covered in heavy mounds. This one sat only a short distance below the top layer of earth. The lead archaeologist reported that the ship felt as if it had been placed in a hurry. Some believed it was a rushed burial. Others believed that erosion might have lowered the ground level over centuries. None of these theories were confirmed, but they added tension to the investigation. Something about this vessel did not follow the expected rules. More surprises emerged when the team uncovered the back of the ship. A semicircle of stones appeared in a clear, organized pattern behind it. The stones were not placed by nature. They formed a ritual layout that has been recorded at a few rare sites in Norway but almost never in Denmark. The size of the layout made it even more unusual. It was too big to be a simple marker and too intentional to be an accident. Some volunteers suggested there might be a second stone layout near the front of the ship, but this has not been verified. The shape and spacing of the planks matched late 9th century shipbuilding methods. However, the archaeologists also found earlier tool marks. These marks did not fit the expected timeline. One specialist noted that the marks resembled techniques used by Swedish boat builders from an earlier period. This observation raised an uncomfortable question. If Swedish craftsmanship was involved, then the ship either traveled far or was built by a mixed group of workers, which contradicts the usual historical record for this region. The team decided to widen the excavation grid. They prepared to expose more of the surrounding soil because the ship clearly formed only part of a larger and far older story. As the team opened a wider area, the soil around the ship showed signs of older activity. It became clear that something had happened here long before the ship was buried. The older earth beneath the ship. When the team dug beneath the longship, they immediately noticed that the soil changed. The layer under the vessel was darker and heavier, and its texture did not match the layers above. The soil clearly showed signs of earlier activity. This was the first strong indication that the ship burial was not the original purpose of the site. Something else had happened here long before the Vikings placed a ship in this location. The first major clue was a spread of charcoal and burned plant material across a flat, even surface. This was not the result of an accidental fire. It was organized and deliberate. Several archaeologists recognized it as the remains of controlled ritual fires. That alone raised concern. Such fires usually appear in ceremonial zones rather than everyday settlements. The idea that this area had once hosted repeated ceremonies began to emerge quickly. A second discovery deepened the mystery. Small copper fragments appeared in tight, intentional clusters. They were simple pieces, not decorative objects and not standard Viking grave goods. Nothing about them matched the ship burial above. Some experts believed they might have been used as offerings in a pre-Viking ritual. Their placement made it clear that they belonged to a different chapter of the site's history. The third clue created the strongest reaction from the team. Beneath the center of the ship, they found a circular pit that had been filled in long before the vessel was placed above it. The pit was cleanly shaped and deliberate. This suggested that something had been placed there and later removed, or that it had served a purpose that no longer left visible traces. Whatever it was, the Vikings had buried their ship directly over it. These findings left the archaeologists uneasy. The more they uncovered, the clearer it became that the ship burial was only the latest event in a much older sequence. The site had been sacred long before the longship arrived. The team now understood that they were dealing with layers of ritual activity stacked across generations, each leaving behind traces that no longer matched the next. These findings left the archaeologists with a clear challenge. The site was older and more complex than expected, and the team now needed a broader framework to understand what kind of practices had shaped this ground long before the ship was placed above it. Burial traditions that whisper through centuries. As the team studied the older layers beneath the longship, they compared their findings with known burial patterns from early Scandinavian sites. These early graves were not random. Many were aligned with the rising or setting sun, a choice meant to guide the dead toward renewal or onward passage. This type of orientation helped the archaeologists understand that the ground beneath the ship was part of a long tradition that placed strong value on direction, order, and ritual structure. Next, the team reviewed material from Danish Iron Age graves that showed clear signs of organized ceremony. Items like simple amulets, burned offerings, and small ritual tools appeared in several of these sites. Their consistency across multiple locations showed that these communities followed established rules when preparing sacred ground. This made the archaeologists uneasy because the soil beneath the longship matched these older practices more closely than it matched Viking ship burial customs. The team also noted evidence from regional graves that included protective objects rather than weapons. These objects, carved figures, charms, and small symbols used to guard family lines or clan spaces, pointed to a different kind of ceremonial role in early burial areas. This helped the researchers consider that the land under the longship may have been used for a specific purpose before the ship was ever placed above it. Finally, the presence of ritual fire traces beneath the longship connected the site to long-standing ceremonial behavior. Early Scandinavian groups sometimes prepared burial ground with controlled fires to purify the area. The charcoal and burned plant matter at the site fit this pattern exactly. This strengthened the view that the ground had held meaning long before the Vikings arrived. Taken together, these details showed that the longship burial was placed on top of an older ceremonial area used for repeated ritual activity. But before they could determine who used this ground, another discovery changed the direction of the investigation. The war gear no one expected to find. As the team opened a new section of the trench beside the longship's hull, a sharp metal clink rose from the soil and made everyone pause. The excavators brushed back the loose earth and uncovered a small cluster of iron spearheads packed tightly together. They were not scattered by time or erosion. They were grouped neatly as if someone had placed them there on purpose. The discovery stopped the team because this kind of careful placement is rare in normal burials. According to field notes, the lead excavator examined the cluster and immediately saw that each spearhead had been set down in an organized way. Not far from the spear cluster, shield bosses began to appear. These circular plates were arranged in a crescent, each one facing the same direction. They were buried with an order that suggested plan and pattern. Volunteers who had worked on earlier trenches compared notes and said they had never seen such an organized layout within a grave context in this region. Some suggested these might have been set in formation to represent a shield wall. Others warned that this was speculation and that the pattern might have another meaning. The blades that surfaced next reinforced the sense of a military presence. Several sword fragments showed identical sharpening marks along their edges. The uniformity suggested a common workshop or a shared standard for maintaining weapons. One conservator reported that the grind marks matched techniques seen in known military camps rather than in private high-status graves. This pointed toward collective training or centralized arms maintenance. Bundles of arrowheads came up in groups. Each bundle contained finely made tips that differed slightly from the others in size and shape. The archaeologists treated the bundles as tactical groupings. According to some interpretations reported by the team, the bundles could reflect different roles on a battlefield, such as skirmishers versus mainline archers. This reading was not certain, but it added to the growing belief that the site had a martial function. A fragment of armor made an unexpected appearance. It carried decorative inlays unlike those typically found in Danish contexts. Some experts on the team believed the style hinted at influence from outside the immediate region. This raised questions about where the equipment came from and who had used it. Leather bindings found nearby were stiff and worn in ways that pointed to repeated use. The wear patterns matched those seen on gear used in active combat rather than ceremonial display. The soil also yielded groups of broken whetstones. The stones were arranged in short sets as if they had been kept where weapons were regularly sharpened. A weapons conservator suggested that this pattern is more typical of an armory or a campsite than of an elite tomb. These discoveries pushed the team toward hard questions. Were they above a battlefield burial where fighters had been laid to rest on site? Had they uncovered a storage or depot for military gear that was later buried? Or did the arrangement represent a ritual deposition with martial symbolism? Some reported that volunteers whispered about a possibility none wanted to name. The only certainty was that the finds did not fit simple categories. The excavation took a dramatic turn when the next layer revealed human remains. The mass grave of women who were never supposed to exist. The tension in the trench rose as the team brushed away the soil from the first fully exposed skeleton. At first there was no clear sign of identity, only the familiar shape of a human form. The team worked slowly, cleaning each bone so that nothing would be missed. When the pelvic structure became visible, one of the osteologists paused and asked everyone to check again. The pelvis was unmistakable. It belonged to a woman. The entire trench went silent. According to reports, several members of the team initially believed they were misreading the bones. They repeated the examination and came to the same conclusion. The first skeleton in this long-hidden formation was female. The discovery set off a wave of confusion. As the team continued removing soil, more skeletons appeared. They lay close together in a formation so tight that it looked intentional. Pelvic analysis on the second and third skeletons confirmed that they were women as well. The pattern continued from one body to the next. The researchers understood that this was no isolated case. It was an entire cluster of women buried with military precision. Some experts in the group reported that the skeletal wear patterns suggested trained fighters. Muscle attachment points on the arms and shoulders showed signs of repeated weapon use. Healed fractures indicated earlier injuries that had mended during life, the kind seen in individuals accustomed to physical conflict. The orientation of the skeletons added another layer of mystery. Every body faced the same direction. They were arranged in a formation that did not match any known Viking burial customs. The precision of the layout left the team unsettled because it suggested a shared identity or a unified purpose. When they uncovered the hands and torsos, the shock deepened. Many of the skeletons had weapons placed beside them or held in their arms. These weapons were positioned carefully, not thrown in or scattered. According to some interpretations discussed at the scene, this placement might reflect a coordinated fighting unit, though nothing in the historical record supports the existence of such a group. As the excavators worked around the torsos, they found objects that made the situation even more unusual. Small crosses lay near the ribs and necks of several women. Some crosses were carved from whalebone. Others were made of bronze. A few wooden ones were preserved in pockets of soil with very little oxygen, allowing the details to survive. The cross placement appeared intentional. The presence of Christian symbols in a burial that clearly predated the official conversion of Denmark raised immediate questions. Some experts believe the crosses were personal possessions that reflected early contact with Christian communities. Others argued that they might represent a small and secret group who practiced Christian rituals long before the Danish rulers accepted the new faith. None of these theories could be confirmed, but they all highlighted the same point. These women belonged to a belief system that did not fit accepted timelines. The contradiction struck the entire team. The skeletons displayed the traits of professional warriors, while the grave goods reflected Christian influence. The combination should not have existed together in this period. The evidence pointed toward the possibility that an organized female warrior order had once operated in this region, perhaps with ties to early Christian teachings that were never recorded in surviving sources. The implications were overwhelming. If true, this would require a complete rethinking of gender roles, religious development, and military structure in early Scandinavian society. The discovery shakes the team, but the investigation pushes deeper, seeking scientific confirmation that will determine whether this burial represents an isolated aberration or a phenomenon that demands a rewritten history of Denmark. Forensics that rewrite the story of Denmark. The excavation moved into its final stage when the forensic teams arrived on site. They began their work by collecting bone samples from several of the women. DNA analysis was the first major test. When the results came back, the findings shocked the entire group. The women did not come from a single region. Their genetic markers linked them to different parts of Scandinavia and even to communities along the Baltic coast. This meant They were not a local family group or a village militia. They had been brought together from distant places. According to some interpretations from the genetic team, this pointed toward a recruitment system rather than an isolated settlement tradition. Isotopic testing followed. It measured the chemical signatures preserved in the bones, which reflected diet and long-term living patterns. The results showed a high level of similarity across all of the women. This indicated that they ate the same food, trained in the same environment, and lived in a communal setting for years. The isotopes also suggested frequent travel across water, which means they moved together as a unit. These findings strengthened the theory that they were part of an organized group with strict routines and shared obligations. The trauma signatures on the bones revealed the final hours of their lives. Many of the skeletons showed weapon wounds in similar locations, especially along the ribs and upper arms. These were not random injuries. They reflected coordinated combat or a single battle where the women fought in formation. The pattern of trauma indicated that they faced the same opponent at the same moment. Forensic specialists reported that some wounds were fatal, while others revealed blows delivered after the women were already on the ground. The scene suggested a violent and intense conflict. Soil chemistry around the bodies confirmed that the burial took place very quickly. The topsoil showed no signs of long exposure. The women were placed in the ground within days of their deaths. This urgency suggested a battlefield burial, or an attempt to protect the dead before enemies could return. Nothing about the burial reflected slow planning or ceremonial delays. The metal analysis added another layer of complexity. Several weapons carried inscriptions that blended early Christian symbols with traditional Norse patterns. Some experts believed this represented an early and experimental form of Christian identity. Radiocarbon dating then confirmed that the burial occurred before the official Christianization of Denmark under Harald Bluetooth. This implied that Christianity may have entered the region quietly through hidden networks or underground circles long before the royal conversion. These combined findings pointed toward one conclusion. The women belonged to an organized warrior sisterhood with Christian beliefs. Their group had been erased from history or never recorded at all. With the scientific foundation complete, the final focus turns to the impact of this discovery and how it dismantles long-held beliefs about Viking identity, faith, and warfare. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the discovery, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more stories just like this.